The moment you stop feeding the fire, quietly, without the smoke of drama or the sound of an announcement, something trembles inside the narcissist. They don't have words for it, but they feel it strike like thunder splitting the sky. It's a fracture in the machine they built with such precision. They can't admit what it is. They won't confess the control is gone. That would require self-awareness, and self-awareness is foreign ground. What they feel instead is instability, a shaking, an unraveling they can't explain. It's as if oxygen has been stolen from their lungs. Understand this. The narcissist's power doesn't come from muscle or loud domination. It comes from siphoning, emotional siphoning. They provoke, you react. They disappear, you chase. They wound, you defend. They cry, you comfort. It's not a relationship. It's an extraction. And extraction collapses the very moment one piece is removed. You were that piece. Here's where so many get it wrong. Walking away doesn't need to be a scene. You don't need to raise your voice or declare your freedom. Silence, stillness, is louder than any speech. Because the narcissist feeds on reaction. Any emotion, even anger, even sorrow, belongs to them if it's still tethered to their actions. But when your pulse goes quiet, when your response is no longer on display, they feel the void. Psychologically, the narcissist is a shattered self, patching identity together with scraps of conflict and validation. Your emotions once served as their mirror. In your distress, they saw themselves alive. But when you stop dancing to the chaos, when you refuse to bleed out for their approval, that mirror vanishes. And without a mirror, their sense of existence begins to fade. Don't mistake this for a tactic. This is deeper. It's transformation. It's the soul shifting. You move from fear to clarity, from codependence to self-possession, from frantic reaction to discernment. That shift rattles their world like an earthquake. They test the waters, an insult, a disappearance, a guilt trip, and you don't move. They feel the grip slip. The strings they once pulled fall limp in their hands. And here's the truth most never say out loud. Once you awaken, they can't take you back. This isn't behavior modification. It's a resurrection of identity. The old you, the one who explained, pleaded, or justified, no longer exists. You didn't just lock the door. You demolished the house and built a new one. And while they knock and rage on a porch that no longer belongs to you, you're living somewhere entirely different. Tragically, the narcissist can't process this loss. So they rewrite the story. They call you cold, disloyal, ungrateful. They paint you as a betrayer because it's easier than facing the truth. They've lost what they can't counterfeit. Authentic emotional influence. You were the well, and the well is run dry. And the justice in this is profound because your silence is a revenge. It's freedom. You didn't withdraw to punish. You withdrew to survive. And that's what torments the narcissist most, that you chose it, that you walked away without fanfare, that you stopped playing the game. In that silence, they lose everything, not to another person, not to chaos, but to your awakening. Because when you stop being their puppet, you stop being bound. You become free. Then comes the power of boundaries. When your no longer carries an apology, when your limits are non-negotiable, the narcissist feels the ground shift beneath them, not with a bang, but with a steady erosion. Boundaries to them aren't inconveniences. They're threats. They scream one unbearable truth. You're no longer available to be molded, used, or consumed. Boundaries aren't walls of bitterness. They're fences of clarity. They tell the world where you end and another begins. And that clarity, after years of fog, burns the narcissist's illusions like sunlight through smoke. They taught you that no was selfish, that protecting your peace was betrayal. But now you stand unshaken, no longer afraid of disapproval, no longer selling your worth. That transformation is irreversible. Of course, they'll test it. They'll prod. They'll accuse you of cruelty, of being cold, because your silence and your strength expose their weakness. They don't just miss your compliance. They miss your confusion. They miss the version of you who explained yourself to exhaustion, who wept, who begged, who doubted. But that version is gone. You have stepped into a new space where their moods no longer orbit your soul. And that, more than anything, is what terrifies a narcissist. The realization that you become untouchable. And here's the paradox. The stronger your boundary, the less you have to argue for it. It doesn't tremble when tested. It doesn't flare up in reaction. It simply stands, firm, steady, undeniable. And the narcissist, for all the thunder and smoke, feels it, just like a trickster who suddenly realizes the audience has seen through the illusion. The curtain is pulled back, and the show is over. But understand this, a boundary won't be met with applause. It will be attacked, mocked, stretched to breaking. Yet if you stay calm, not angry, but rooted in quiet conviction, something happens. The tools that once shook you, the guilt, the chaos, the games, lose their edge. They fall flat. The storm blows, but you become the mountain. And that's when they know. Not in the slam of a door, not in a shouted declaration, but in your stillness. You won't move. You no longer chase closure. You no longer beg to be understood. You stop explaining your humanity like it's up for debate. That's the moment of awakening. When you finally see that peace was never waiting in their approval. It was always in understanding yourself. And in that revelation, the narcissist faces a stranger, a version of you they can't recognize, because this version isn't for them anymore. It's for you. You're no longer reflection, no longer fuel, no longer a player in their fragile theater. You've stepped out of the script and reclaimed your stage. And then comes a third moment, the one that rattles them to the core. You stop explaining yourself. It seems small. It feels subtle. But it shakes the ground. Because their control never came from chains. It came from your willingness to hand over every thought, every doubt, every reason. They thrived on your explanations, combing them for cracks, twisting your words until you questioned yourself. When you stop explaining, you're saying something deeper than words. My mind is mine again. That's the boundary most people miss. Not time, not space, but sovereignty of thought. You've decided your inner world is no longer a courtroom where the narcissist gets to play judge. Why does this unravel them? Because explanations are raw material for manipulation. Say you're tired. They'll remind you of yesterday's energy. Say you need space. They'll call an excuse. It was never about truth. It was always about control. But when you stop giving them fuel, when your words are simply no, or that doesn't work for me, or I've decided, the stage goes dark. The silence of certainty terrifies them. This isn't cruelty. It isn't indifference. It's the end of war. You've stepped off a battlefield you never chose, and you've stopped bleeding out proof of your worth. That's not coldness, it's clarity. And in that clarity, the narcissist stares into a void where your explanations used to be. A void that echoes with their deepest fear, irrelevance. And then you know something has shifted. You stop trying to fix them, not because your heart has hardened, but because you finally see the truth. It was never your job. It was never even possible. The day your energy, your prayers, your effort no longer circle around their healing, the narcissist feels the ground tilt, because for them, your attention was the scaffolding that held up their illusion of importance. Here's a subtle trap. Empathy whispers, if I just love harder, if I just explain better, maybe they'll change. That's not weakness. That's goodness misused. And the narcissist knows it. They twist your compassion into a chain. They turn your noble hope into an endless obligation. And before long, you're no longer living. You're reflecting. No longer a person. You're a mirror. But the day you put the mirror down, the illusion cracks. And the light that breaks through isn't for them. It's for you. When you stop trying to mend the brokenness of a narcissist, you're no longer staring into a shattered mirror. You reclaim the right to live as your own person, not as a reflection of their dysfunction. That's individuation, stepping out of someone else's projection and standing whole. Jung called it a passage into maturity, but make no mistake, it feels like mourning. You grieve not the person, but the dream that they would ever change. And here's the twist. The moment you stop fixing them, they don't see growth. They see abandonment. To the narcissist, attention equals love. Validation equals love. Control equals love. So when you stop pouring yourself into their chaos, it feels like betrayal. But it isn't betrayal, it's clarity. It's the wisdom to finally say, helping you at the cost of destroying myself is no longer love. It's bondage. See, this is a trap of codependency dressed up as compassion. They never ask you directly to surrender your joy, your goals, your peace. No, they whisper between the lines. Your worth is measured by how much of their chaos you can carry. That's not love, it's captivity. So when you step back, when you allow them to face the consequences of their choices without your rescue, you're not being cruel. You're placing responsibility back where it belongs. That's justice, not revenge. And justice, when it's tempered with wisdom, is love at its purest. Not the kind that pleases, the kind that purifies. And if you've ever truly stopped fixing a narcissist, you've seen it. The panic. They double down. They bait. They play victim. They'll do anything to lure you back into the role of healer, redeemer, savior. But when you stand firm, refusing to sink into the quicksand again, they see it. You're not confused anymore. You're not waiting for them anymore. You're not available anymore. It doesn't roar with noise. It whispers in stillness. You could sit across the table without raising your voice, and they'd feel it. For the first time, they're forced to face themselves without your hands holding up the mask. And that's more terrifying than any confrontation could ever be. The image they lived on, where you were the caretaker and they were the misunderstood victim, shatters. And what's left is reality, unsoftened and irreversible. Let them rage. Let them label you cold, selfish, heartless. You don't need to correct their story. You don't need to fix that either. Because you've already chosen the bravest path, letting go of the fantasy and living in truth. And the truth is simple. Letting go of the need to fix someone isn't giving up on them. It's finally refusing to give up on yourself. Then comes one of the most liberating shifts of all. You stop responding. Not with rage, not with pleading, not with endless explanations. You stop engaging. For someone who has spent years pulled into emotional war zones, that silence feels small. But it isn't. It's seismic. Because silence in this context isn't apathy, it's clarity. And clarity is kryptonite to the narcissist. Their manipulation lives on your reactions. Defensiveness, guilt, tears. It doesn't matter. If they can get a rise, they can bend the narrative. But when you no longer flinch, when the hooks don't catch, their illusion of control crumbles. You become unreadable, unprogrammable. And for the narcissist, who thrives on predictability, that's the ultimate loss. This isn't stonewalling. This isn't a game. It's the deep recognition that your peace is no longer up for auction. You're not withdrawing to punish. You're withdrawing to protect. And that, more than any confrontation, is what shakes them. Because confrontation still ties you to the fight. Silence unravels the entire war. From a psychological lens, this is when individuation locks in. You're no longer a satellite orbiting their drama. You become your own gravitational force. And that terrifies them, not because you've struck, but because you've made them irrelevant. They feel entitled to your attention, your explanations, your suffering. So when you stop giving, it feels like robbery. But it isn't theft, it's restoration. You're no longer moving to the rhythm of dysfunction. And the quieter you become, the louder it is in their ears. Your silence turns into a mirror, not one that reflects their fantasy, but one that exposes their emptiness. And yes, silence is hard, especially if you've been conditioned to explain, to apologize, to seek closure. But closure with a narcissist is a mirage, a trap designed to keep you circling the same wound. Once you see that, you gain something irreplaceable. Choice. The choice to decide when, how, and if you respond at all. Not every provocation deserves an answer. Not every accusation requires defense. Peace isn't found in convincing them of your goodness. Peace is found in realizing you don't need to. That's not coldness. That's freedom. And they'll bait you. They'll call you cruel. They'll even project their own narcissism onto you. But here's the secret. You don't have to answer. Because silence, born of truth, becomes sanctuary. And when you reach that place, when your refusal to engage isn't fear but freedom, the narcissist knows with icy certainty. They haven't just lost access to your body. They've lost access to your mind. You're not pretending. You're not playing dead. You're finally alive.